Welcome to tonight's web event entitled The Assassination of Malcolm X. My name is Jamie Simpson. I'm a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Jesse Neville, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's national chair and a member of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru, Jesse.
Uhuru, Jamie. Good to be here.
And it is an
honor. I want to welcome, if I may cut you off.
Yes, please.
I want to welcome our special guest, Director Aquila of the Department of Agitation and Propaganda of the African People's Socialist Party. We are thrilled and honored to have you with us tonight, Director Aquila.
Uhuru, it is an honor to be here tonight.
Uhuru, we are honored to have you. And if you're not aware, this program is hosted by the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and you're probably watching us either on our YouTube channel or on Facebook. So if you are doing that, please share this live stream far and wide, whether it's from Facebook. If you're watching on YouTube, that's YouTube/Uhuru Solidarity. Please give us a thumbs up, join the channel, like us, and get notifications. So the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is the organization of white people who have been organized under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party to win other white people to a stance of reparations and material solidarity with African people's right to self-determination and reparations. So if you're tuning into one of our webinars for the first time tonight, we want to thank you for joining us. This web talk show is in fact a fundraiser for the Black Power Blueprint, a template for self-determination and dual and contending economic power in the hands of African people. This is economic independence and self-determination for the African working class. In particular, in St. Louis, Missouri, the Uhuru House has been established and the upcoming Uhuru Jiko Kitchen. And we want to also state that our goal for this evening is to raise $500 towards these incredibly essential programs in this time of the crisis of imperialism. And we know we can achieve this goal. We've done it before with your help, and we're going to do it tonight. And we want to begin, as always, by saluting the founder and leader of the Uhuru movement, the chairman of the vanguard of the African working class, the chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Omali Yeshitela. Uhuru. And we also want to salute the visionary on-the-ground leader of the Black Power Blueprint and the African Revolution. We want to salute Deputy Chair Onazene Yeshitela. Uhuru. Uhuru. She continues to lead the Black Power Blueprint in St. Louis and all of the party's economic work. So we also want to salute in its entirety the African People's Socialist Party, without which we would not be here tonight, and in particular, Akilé Anai. Uhuru. And she is not here with us tonight, but we also would be remiss without saluting the original chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, the first white person to take a serious material stance of solidarity with African liberation and with white people's reparations to African people, Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Uhuru. And now I want to turn it over to Chair Jesse Neville.
Uhuru. I want to join in saluting the party, the chairman, deputy chair, as well as APSC Chairwoman Penny Hess, the original and present day chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and just say that this Black Power Blueprint web series that the funding campaign of that project has been carrying out has been coordinated amazingly by by Chairwoman Penny Hess under the leadership of Deputy Chair Onizane Shatella. And this Uhuru Solidarity Movement web talk show tonight is part of that series. We alternate every Tuesday. Every other Tuesday we have a USM web talk show, and then alternating that is a Black Power Blueprint one. So thank you for tuning in. And I also want to, again, salute Director Aquila for being with us and acknowledge that you are a leading member of the African People's Socialist Party, a member of the National Central Committee of the African People's Socialist Party, and we know that this is going to be an amazing program because we have you with us tonight. So thank you so much again for being here.
Uhuru.
Uhuru. Unite. Please stay tuned for our interview with Director Akilé Anai. It is going to be fantastic. Yes. But we want to discuss a bit what it is that we're asking you to help us achieve tonight with the $500 goal. So the first phase of the campaign raised thousands of dollars for the renovation of the beautiful new Uhuru House in St. Louis. And you were a huge part of making this happen. Everyone who is watching tonight, perhaps people who aren't even watching tonight, have contributed up until this point. And for that, we are very grateful and we salute your stance. Because of you, because of your support of these weekly webinars, these weekly talk shows, and the amazing Black Power Blueprint, Phase 2 was then able to go into effect with the demolition of 2 condemned buildings across the street, which is no small feat, and the new Uhuru House being erected to make room for the founding of a One Africa, One Nation marketplace, which will stimulate Black community commerce for and between African people. And in addition to this, a 50-foot flagpole was also raised to prepare for the unveiling of the tremendous African red, black, and green flag, which is flying high. So we are now into stage 3 of the funding phase as this project gears up to renovate the Boathouse building across the street in St. Louis as the site of the future Uhuru Jiko, or Freedom Kitchen, community commercial kitchen. This is another fantastic dual and contending power program that will serve as a seed of the independent African economy and the seizure of power over the means of production, of food production in particular, and distribution in the hands of the African working class. This is an incredibly important task for the African Revolution, to have control over their own food, their own nutrition, something that is very much lacking in African communities throughout the nation and the world. You can contribute towards this goal tonight by going to blackpowerblueprint.org. Again, that is blackpowerblueprint.org. Like you have so many times in the past, perhaps this is your first night. We will announce your donations and statements throughout the program tonight as you do that. So, Jesse, could you help us out by giving us a bit of a political overview of what we're going to be discussing in terms of the assassination of Malcolm X?
Definitely. And before I do that, Jamie, I want to thank, first of all, Troy Howard, who gave $100 yesterday and said, quote, "I love seeing this positive community effort in my hometown. Thank you for doing this good work." And thank you to Troy Howard if you're out there watching. And also want to reiterate that you can be like Troy and go to blackpowerblueprint.org and put in towards our goal tonight. We want to raise $500 minimum. The goal is a minimum. So let's go above and beyond that. These resources are urgently needed. This project is not slowing down. It is speeding up, and the resources are needed now more than ever. And I want to thank Ali Ayello, who is tuning in, who is the National Secretary of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, who's got us started off tonight with a $20 contribution. So Uhuru to Ali Ayello. Uhuru.
Yes, Uhuru.
So a few days ago, February 21st, marked what the African People's Socialist Party has since 1981 referred to as African Martyrs Day. And the reason why the party chose to designate February 21st as African Martyrs Day is because on February 21st, 1965, in Harlem, New York, Malcolm X, the great African revolutionary leader, was assassinated brutally by the US government and those who collaborated with the US government. So today, 54 years later, all over the world, Malcolm X's name and face and life and legacy continue to inspire millions. Millions of Africans, of oppressed peoples, of freedom-loving people all over the world uphold Malcolm as a giant, as a martyr who fought and died in the struggle for liberation for African people and self-determination to be free from the chains of imperialism, parasitic capitalism, colonialism, and neo-colonialism. Malcolm X was the most influential and critical voice of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. And Chairman Omali Yeshitela has said that Malcolm X was the ideological father in so many ways of the Black Revolution of the 60s because he represented the interests of the African working class. He represented the interests of struggling for power in the hands of the African working class. And he was inspiring and informing the major uprisings that were happening in urban centers throughout the US, urban-based rebellions that were critical battlegrounds of the Black Revolution of the 1960s. And more than anyone else at that time, it was Malcolm X who took the struggle of African people at that time away from just being one of civil rights, trying to get into the system in a more comfortable way, onto the world stage as part of the anti-colonial struggle of the world's colonized peoples by lifting up the demand for Black power. That was what Malcolm X represented. And he was murdered shortly after he left the Nation of Islam. And he moved away from the Nation of Islam, away from a religious-based analysis and summation of the world to a more materialist way of looking at the world and to a revolutionary position. He was the only one in that organization who was talking about revolution. And it was because he was talking about Black power and revolution that millions of people followed him when he was in the Nation of Islam. And he left the Nation of Islam to continue building a revolutionary movement of African people at a time when, as Chairman Omali Yeshitela has says, revolution was the main trend around the world. So it was an amazing time that was referred to as, a period of great optimism and exuberance for everyone who had been forced to live under the yoke of capitalism for 500 years. You had the people of China, you had India, Cuba, who rose up, who made revolutions, who fought US imperialism and won. You had Vietnam, which, as Malcolm X himself said, were poor peasants who fought with nothing but a switchblade and a bowl of rice and defeated and brought down US imperialism in the land of Vietnam. And similar struggles that took over in Asia and Latin America and the Arab world and everywhere. Oppressed peoples rose up to resist and to throw off the chains of oppression and reclaim the future of their children. Malcolm X spoke at Oxford University. We're going to see a clip of that later tonight. And I also want to acknowledge that, the Agitation and Propaganda Department just published an amazing documentary about the chairman's visit to Oxford, which we're going to see a little bit of that speech as well. 2 months after Malcolm spoke at Oxford University, he was murdered. 2 months. And in fact, Tariq Ali, who was part of the Oxford Union at the time, in 1964, approached Malcolm afterwards and said, now that this is over, what do you see for the future? And he says, I see nothing because I will be dead within months. He knew that it was coming. From the point of view of the US government, like Garvey 40 years before him, Malcolm X was the most dangerous man in America. He represented the poor and working class African people from the ghettos of the North to the sharecropping plantations of the South. And the US government murdered him in a public, brutal way, only reserved for leaders of the Black Revolution and other anti-colonial movements. So the way they did it was, during a speech that Malcolm was giving at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem, there was a group of people who were tied to the Nation of Islam and the FBI, and they created a disturbance in the room. So all the security trained their eyes on that. They looked away from Malcolm, they looked away from everything else, and they focused on, what is this disturbance? Somebody fell, something happened in the room. So then somebody else in another part of the room charges forward with a rifle in their hands and opens fire on Malcolm X. And that was how they did it. So they took advantage of that security weakness to kill Malcolm in a very public and brutal and horrific fashion. And after his assassination, they tried to assassinate his ideas and what he stood for. And imperialism, the media, and the petty bourgeoisie, even at his funeral, tried to water down what he stood for. And he went to Mecca and came back and decided that all people are good, and there's white Muslims and there's black Muslims, and all that kind of thing. And they tried to totally change what he stood for. And it's the same thing that they did after Huey Newton was killed. The US government and the media, they tried to slander him. They referred in the Oakland Tribune, you can read about this in the chairman's new book, Vanguard, the Political Report to the 7th Congress, that when Huey Newton died, They referred to him in the Oakland Tribune as a bum. They said from prime minister to bum. They called him a thug, a criminal, a pimp. They said all these horrible things about him. And the party, the chairman and the Uhuru movement sprang into action and started mobilizing in the streets, and they turned around the tide of public opinion about Huey Newton. And within a week, even the Oakland Tribune had to acknowledge what a significant leader and hero Huey had been to the African masses and oppressed peoples of the world. The party changed the narrative on that. So Malcolm X, just to finish this off, was murdered as part of a whole campaign of counterinsurgency that involved assassinations and arrests and all kinds of things against the African liberation movement in the 1960s. The goal of which was to prevent the rise of what they called a black messiah, the rise of a leader who could take the African masses to the promised land of their liberation. And they warned that, people like Malcolm and Martin Luther King were potential. So,
Jess, do you mind if I interrupt just on behalf of anyone that might not be familiar with the term Messiah?
Yeah.
What is meant by Black Messiah when the FBI uses that term? Do they mean it in a religious sense?
No,
or
they just
could you
mean
discuss that?
the one who would lead the people and deliver them from the conditions of their oppression. And that's what they meant. And they could see that those leaders were coming up in the movement. So what was COINTELPRO's mission? According to J. Edgar Hoover's memo that was sent to FBI field offices throughout the country, the COINTELPRO mission was to, quote, expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of black nationalist, quote, hate-type organizations and groupings, their leadership, spokesmen, membership, and supporters, and to counter their propensity for violence and civil disorder. And the word neutralize is a euphemism for do whatever you have to do to get rid of them. And the FBI infiltrated many organizations, including they heavily infiltrated the Nation of Islam to bring them into the process of assassinating Malcolm X and to create a culture of gossip and slander and lies that paved the way for the ultimate physical destruction of this amazing African revolutionary leader. So that's why we wanted to hold this program tonight, because especially for those of us in the white community, we grow up driving down Martin Luther King Boulevard, not even thinking about the fact that Martin Luther King was assassinated by the U.S. government, that Malcolm X was assassinated by the U.S. government, that Bobby Hutton, Fred Hampton, all these other amazing African revolutionary leaders, we just take it for granted. Like we don't even have a response to that, generally speaking, as white people, that the righteous struggle of an oppressed people to have happiness and control of their own resources and their future would be violently, brutally attacked by our government. And this is our opportunity to respond to that, to respond with rage and with action by becoming revolutionaries, by struggling to be like Malcolm X and to uphold what he stood for. And now there is a way for us to do that by joining under the leadership of the African Revolution, by joining under the leadership of the party, the African People's Socialist Party, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who is the Malcolm X of this time, and by joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and building the struggle for reparations to African people inside the white community. So that's what this is about, and that's what I wanted to say in terms of just a quick overview.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Jesse. Really unite with everything you laid out. And I want to turn now to a discussion with the Director of Agitation and Propaganda, a bold and brilliant leader within the ranks of the African People's Socialist Party, Akilé Anai. Uhuru, and welcome, Director Akilé Anai of the Agitprop. Thank you so much for being with us on our program tonight. And for those who might be tuning into this web talk show for the first time, could you please discuss with us your role within the African People's Socialist Party, how you came to be a member and a leader within the Uhuru movement?
Uhuru. Well, first and foremost, I really want to appreciate this program, appreciate the work of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement as it relates to the Black Power Blueprint Project, which is led by Deputy Chair Onizane Yeshitela, and also want to recognize my leadership chairman, Omali Yeshitela, who ultimately the reason I'm in political life, the reason I'm here today as a part of the Department of Agitation and Propaganda and a member of the African Socialist Party is because of the tireless work of Chairman Omali Yeshitela to take what happened in the 60s, to take what happened to Africans 600 years ago and overturn that entire relationship, overturn that legacy of rape, of genocide, of slavery and colonialism, and bring us into the new world. So I wanted to recognize my leadership Really appreciate being a part of this program, appreciate being able to have this discussion on Malcolm X, who was everything that, we've stated already in this discussion in terms of, just a brilliant giant, in terms of the struggle for national liberation for African people, that there were a lot of questions answered through Malcolm X, and there was a lot of, even in death, he provided political leadership to the masses and continues to today. He is still looked up to as someone who was on the right side of the question, on the side of the people in this struggle. And in terms of what my role is in agitation and propaganda, what you said about what the bourgeois media did with Huey P. Newton and Malcolm X and other leaders with the Black Panther Party, because a part of that counterinsurgency, a part of the COINTELPRO was to wage a war of ideas that the fight for Black power and self-determination was bad, and that the peoples around the world fighting for power and self-determination, from independence, from colonial domination, was bad. And so agitation and propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party is our ability to be able to control the narrative, to communicate the ideas and the theory of African internationalism to the masses, to win people to the party and all of our organizations, to get them to understand and to analyze the world it is that we live in from the worldview of the African working class, to understand that we live in a situation where African people all around the world are catching hell, are colonized, dominated, our resources are being extracted from us. We are a dispersed nation, 1.5 billion Africans, and we have to come unite under the leadership of the African working class, under the vanguard, the advanced detachment, which is the African People's Socialist Party, and fight for the future of humanity through this struggle. And so agitation and propaganda wages this war of ideas through our various instruments. We have the Burning Spear newspaper, we have all of our online and social media apparatus, we have Black Power 96.3 FM radio station, we have all of our books, our publications, and whatever means that we can get out into the world, communicate with the people to let them know that this movement is here, the revolution is alive, and that they can come here and be a part of it, and also to provide political education to the masses, because it's something that we need, and that Africans and all people, we've been pushed out of political life and the veil has been pulled over our eyes so that we can go comfortably working in this system and upholding it. So that is my responsibility in this work. It's to defeat things like the bourgeois media and be able to forward the message, the mission of the African working class. And I got here just as a result of, being in a city of resistance, St. Petersburg, Florida, where Chairman was born and has led, many courageous struggles and really permeated this city, is where the first act of Black power was ever committed, when Chairman tore down a mural in 1966, the racist mural that hung in City Hall. And as a result of all of that, my dad, found out about the Uhuru movement. He was here, then naturally it was passed on to me, and I officially really got into political life when the murder of Mike Brown happened in 2014, and it was enough talk, it was time for action, and so I joined a movement that was about action. So
Uhuru. And you have done so much in that time, and I really appreciate your presence here tonight, Director Akilé. So tonight we are discussing the assassination of the giant that was Malcolm X. Why do you feel that it is so important in this period that we live in today to discuss, to talk about, and expose the circumstances that led to Malcolm X's death?
Yeah, well, I think it's important for everyone who doesn't understand the counterinsurgency and what the U.S. government, what white power imperialism is willing to do to ensure that the future of African people won't be victorious. It's important to understand what we are dealing with. A monster. We're dealing with a violent monster who's been feeding off the lies of oppressed and colonized people for 600 years. It's been stuffing its face. It rescued itself through this process. And when we can understand, something like the death of Malcolm X and what led to it, we understand then what kind of system we're dealing with. And it also helps to expose the crisis of imperialism, because when you have a person like Malcolm X who is able to put forth on, put forth all this information, the theory, and all these different things that were being developed through this process, and be able to mobilize Africans all around the world to the understanding when Africans had already, since coming into the relationship with white power, Africans have always been resisting, always fighting back. And as a result of the different, false national consciousness and all of these, different identities being thrust upon us and the dispersal of Africans around the world and the taking of our resources, we've really just been fighting and fighting to be a free people and trying to figure out how does that happen. And, prior to Malcolm X, and we'll, talk about him in a moment, Marcus Garvey. So the world was already, permeated with this idea and understanding that African people have to be free. We have to move forward, that it's an inevitable process. Like the trajectory, the natural forward motion of history is moving toward Africa being free. And so you had this person, Malcolm X, who was able to talk about what he was able to talk about, to say and mobilize all of these people. And white power can't have that. White power can't have any kind of threat. That's the thing about the, assassinating or, crushing the rise of a black messiah, a black leader, because when that person, stands up, when that person exists, then it threatens the whole foundation of which white power rests. And so the need to kill Malcolm X exposes the crisis of imperialism. It shows that white power is losing its grip on the world, that it is unable to control, all the things that it's stealing, it's unable to control the power that it has around the planet. And now it has to engage in, what it's always been engaged in to maintain it, has to engage in, violence and taking the life of people like Malcolm X, who has the ability to organize these people. And, we learn why Malcolm had to die in order for imperialism to live another day. Exactly. And so that's why it's important to talk about, the death, what led to the death of Malcolm X, why the U.S. government would move to assassinate Malcolm X. And, it also helps to expose the people that the U.S. government didn't assassinate. And we know why they didn't assassinate these people, because they represent a certain class, represent the African petty bourgeoisie. They represent white power in blackface. So you can see why Malcolm X could be killed, but you can see why the first black president could live, which was Barack Hussein Obama, and, in this day and age. So we get to understand that a bit more. And we also get to understand that the period that we're in today, that revolution is becoming the main trend again. Where Malcolm X was in a situation where the revolution was becoming the main trend, and then it was killed off. Right. And so now we can see the situation that Malcolm X was in, and we can see the conditions that were surrounding that, and we can see that we're approaching that. We saw in 2014 with the rise of those Africans in Ferguson who, just this mighty rebellion, and they were saying, kill the pigs, which was something that was reminiscent of what was happening in the 60s when the people were saying off the pigs. So it was, Chairman New said the revolution was back on. It was, taking charge. And so we get an understanding of where we are today, that we know we're entering a similar era. And now it's more intense because the Black Revolution, the Black Liberation Movement is more advanced. So the period is more intense because the Black Liberation Movement has developed since Malcolm X's death. And, that's why understanding this situation, it helps us, it prepares us for the work that's up ahead. So.
Uhuru. Thank you.
Uhuru, I really appreciate that response and this whole discussion with Agitprop Director Akilé, and you're watching the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's web talk show as a fundraiser for the Black Power Blueprint. Before we get to our next question, I just want to quickly thank some of our viewers out there tonight. Gregory Pfister, who put in $5 towards the goal tonight. Uhuru Gregory. Right. Janice Kant, who put in $50. Uhuru to Comrade Janice. And Amanda Carlozzi, who is here with us in the live studio audience, who put in $30. So Uhuru to everybody. We've raised $105. So we got $395 to go to reach our minimum goal tonight that we want to raise $500. So we're raising resources for the Black Power Blueprint, which in so many ways represents the 21st century manifestation of what Marcus Garvey stood for. Yeah. And that brings us to our next question. Garvey.
Yes.
The chairman has called the Uhuru movement the Garveyites of this time. And Malcolm X's parents were Garveyites. And we want to show a clip, actually, of a documentary. You can see this on YouTube. It's called Make It Plain. It's a very good documentary, actually. And this is a clip that talks about Malcolm X's family and the influence that Marcus Garvey had on their worldview. And when we come back, we will be discussing this with Agitprop Director Akilé Anai.
He was always speaking in terms of Marcus Garvey's way of thinking and trying to get black people to organize themselves, not to cause any trouble, but just to work in unity with each other toward improving their conditions. But in those days, if you did that, you were still considered a troublemaker.
In the 1920s, Marcus Garvey, a black nationalist, preached that black Americans should build a nation independent of white society. With membership in the hundreds of thousands, Garvey's Universal Negro Improvement Association sought closer ties with African countries. The UNIA had its own flag, its own national anthem, and an African Legion pledged to defend black people at home and abroad. The U.S. Bureau of Investigation labeled Garvey one of the prominent Negro agitators. The federal government deported him in 1927, but Malcolm's parents remained Garveyites. Earl recruited new members. Louise wrote for the Garvey newspaper.
My mother is the one who would read to us the Garvey paper, which was called the Negro World. She also would talk to us about ourselves as being independent, calling ourselves Negroes or niggers, and that we were black people, and that we should be proud to call ourselves black people.
What is your real name?
Malcolm X.
Is that your legal name?
As far as I'm concerned, it's my legal name.
Would you mind telling me what your father's last name was?
My father didn't know his last name. My father got his last name from his grandfather, and his grandfather got it from his grandfather, who got it from the slave master. The real names of our people were destroyed during slavery.
Was there any line, any point in the genealogy of your family when you did have to use the last name, and if so, what was it?
The last name of my forefathers was taken from them when they were brought to America and made slaves. And then the name of the slave master was given, which we refuse. We reject that name today.
You mean you won't even tell me what your father's supposed last name was or gifted last name was?
I never acknowledge it whatsoever.
Uhuru, Malcolm X.
Beautiful clip.
Brilliant. So that's very powerful to see, his family, and they were Garveyites, and, of course, his father was also assassinated. Mm-hmm. His father was assassinated by a Ku Klux Klan-like organization in Michigan, I believe. So, this is the history of Malcolm X's family. It's from Make It Plain. So, Director Aquila, what do you think of that? What are your thoughts? And, specifically, the Uhuru movement today is continuing the work of Marcus Garvey that inspired Malcolm's parents over 100 years ago. So, could you talk about that?
Yeah. It's true when Chairman says that, the party and the Uhuru movement is the 21st century Garvey movement. And in that we're the only organization on the planet that is, the closest thing to what, Garvey, fought for. And it's actually it was expounding on and, defining it more and really taking it by the reins. And you can see when you look at the African People's Socialist Party, and if you know about Marcus Garvey, you know about the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the African Communities League, you would see, you would understand, okay, this is why they consider themselves this way, because it literally mirrors what Marcus Garvey fought for. And, Marcus Garvey did something, and fought for something that, the world, again, it was something that Africans had been engaged in since we came into contact with white power, but it was on a magnitude that we hadn't experienced it at this point. And it was because of Marcus Garvey that a lot of things, we were able to sum up a lot of things from what Marcus Garvey did. And we know Marcus Garvey was able to organize 11 million Africans around the world.
Wow.
Without social media, without what we have today, was able to organize 11 million Africans and, held up the slogan, Africa for Africans, those at home and those abroad, raise this national question up high. And as a result of it, we got, the red, black, and green, the African nation flag voted on by African people, And so it was a question of the national identity, which assaulted this whole idea that Africans are these different identities that white power has placed on us, that, we are in Jamaica as Jamaicans, and we are Haitians in Haiti, and we are, wherever else we're African Americans in the US, assaulted this whole idea and made African people aware that, Africa is our land, and that's all of the resources and everything that's happening to Africa right now is happening to us. It's happening to Africans in the US, it's happening to Africans in the Caribbean and Africans in Europe, and wherever it is we've been dispersed, it's happening because it's happening to Africa. And so Marcus Garvey was able to really raise this up. And then, of course, Marcus Garvey took it a step further. We are African and we have to fight for power. We have to fight for self-determination. And that is the key to liberation. And so he created these economic institutions that could actually put the power in the hands of African people. It wasn't, I want to integrate. I'm going to beg or plead for what. No, it was, we're going to do for self. We're going to create it. We're going to create the means to be able to do it for ourselves. And who other than the Uhuru movement today do you see anybody saying this is what we're going to do if it's not tied to some kind of black capitalist, agenda? This is about Black self-determination, power, African liberation in our own hands, forwarding the African liberation through the projects and institutions that we own. Because the Black Power blueprint is not, this entity that is going to, it assaults white power today. It assaults white power. Every dollar that you contribute to the Black Power blueprint and what's happening in St. Louis, the rise of the red, black, and green flag in Northside St. Louis, the African working class community that empowers that community, where they claim that flag and they fight for that flag, because then when they fight for that flag, they're fighting for Africa. The Black Power blueprint is an assault on white power. And so, we are creating these economic institutions today, not to make a couple of Negroes some money, but to empower the African working class community so that we can fight and liberate ourselves. And that's what you are a part of. Even when you contribute to the Black Power blueprint, you are a part of the liberation of African people. And so, for all Africans out there who are watching and participating in this discussion, you need to donate to Black Power Blueprint as well. But also when talk about Garvey and this amazing economic institution that he had, this Black Star steamship line, the only steamship. We don't have a steamship today. We had a black president. We don't have a steamship line today. We don't have anything on the magnitude that Marcus Garvey had. White power didn't give us any of that. They gave us Nelson Mandela, and they gave us all these other people that are supposed to represent Africans today. But when they assaulted the movement, Marcus Garvey's movement, they took all that away, and come in the 60s, and they killed off the revolution in the 60s, and they propped up, these people. We don't have what Marcus Garvey had until the Uhuru movement came along, and then we saw the reemergence of what it is that Garvey had created through all the institutions it is that we have. And so we are about forwarding the liberation of African people. We recognize that Africans are 1.5 billion strong, located all around the world, and that these borders and these names that have been imposed on us were exactly that, imposed on us. We didn't decide these names, we didn't decide these identities. In fact, it was decided in a conference that we didn't have anything to do with. And, so we recognize this fact. We recognize that the struggle has to be for power and self-determination, not a struggle for white people to like us, not a struggle for integration, not a struggle to sit next to white people and eat at their same restaurants and get to, sit on the same toilets as white people. It's about taking it and doing it for ourselves. And, that is what we are engaged in. And so that's why the Uhuru movement can confidently say that we are the 21st century Garvey movement, upholding the African working class, at the center, through everything it is that we do. So.
Wow. Uhuru, thank you once again, Director Aquila, for that fantastic overview. Tonight, of course, we're discussing Malcolm X, who was killed as a part of the COINTELPRO, which is short for, if I'm not mistaken, Counterintelligence Program.
Right.
And this was a program of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or the FBI, the top cops of the United States. And like so many others who were murdered or imprisoned by the U.S. government during this period of the Black Revolution of the 1960s, it was just brutal and unapologetic on the part of a U.S. government that could not debate with what Malcolm X was putting out. Can you talk to us about this brutal program and the African People's Socialist Party's understanding of the counterinsurgency? I know you touched on it earlier, but could you go into more depth about the party's understanding of counterinsurgency and how the party has survived the counterinsurgency even up until this point and been able to continue to fight and deepen the question of African liberation to this day?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. I think it's, extremely important. Again, understanding all of this, how it came into being. Prior to and leading up to the Black Revolution of the 60s, we saw some amazing struggles happening around the world. We talked about China, talked about Vietnam, Russia, and all these places around the world that were like the U.S. was trying to control, and U.S. imperialism in the white world and Europe and all these places. The white world's trying to control the colonized and oppressed masses around the world, and then we saw these amazing revolutions happening. And, it was scary for the U.S. in this particular time, but I think that the Black Revolution had the U.S. government terrified. It was the most afraid it had ever been, because the basis for everything, for the whole white world, for French to be able to do what it did to Vietnam, and for the white world to be able to do what it has done to the whole planet, is based on what they were able to do to Africa 600 years ago. And the basis for everything, all the pain, all the destruction and the despair you see in the world is as a result of colonialism, of Europe assaulting Africa and building an entire foundation, an economic system that is based on exploiting, colonizing, oppressing African people. That's the basis, that's the foundation of it. And so for Black people to be fighting against imperialism and, to overthrowing the system and fighting for Black power, when you fight for Black power, it means that white power can't exist. It means that this whole thing ceases to exist, and you start to understand, okay, you learn more and more, you get, okay, how did this whole thing come into existence? Okay, this is how it came into existence. Okay, so this is how you take it out. And so the Black Revolution was the most terrifying thing that white power could ever, conceive of, ever had to deal with, because that's the pedestal. The pedestal, when African people are free, when Africa is free, the whole world is free. And that's why capitalism exists in these places that had revolutions, had amazing, that's why it exists today, because the basis of capitalism, the first capital, has not been destroyed. That basis is not gone. It still exists. So when you destroy that, you destroy the entire white world. You destroy imperialism for good. And the rest of humanity is freed up. White power has no control over the world and the planet anymore. Has no control. So it was the most terrifying thing they'd ever seen, which explains this, what Chairman has called a war without terms. The most vicious, bloody assault on the Black Revolution of the 60s, where, we talked about this assassination of Malcolm X and the public assassination in a very open way, the same way they did Mike Brown, to show what they are willing to do to African people if you stand up, if you say anything, if you dare to fight back. This is what we'll do to you. And so they killed Malcolm X in this very public way, and they killed King, and they killed the Black Panther Party, and they, destroyed. And before that, they crushed the Garvey movement. The white world, U.S. imperialism was, it was really a vicious battle. It was, not without consequences for white power, of course. As a result of the struggle for Black power, we're here today. So, in terms of the consequences, but, so it was, as mentioned, and what the COINTELPRO is, a counterintelligence program, and everything it is that they were willing to do. And we could, I think we would spend a lot of time if we talked about all the things that, the U.S. military and, the U.S. government did to African people in this country alone during this struggle. But, and then also what it did was, which was another harmful thing for the Black Revolution, because they killed off all the leaders. They killed them off, or they put them in prison, and they scared the rest of everybody, and, nobody wanted to fight anymore. Nobody wanted to be a part of it, because white power had flexed its muscles and said, this is what happens when you participate in this kind of struggle. And so they pushed Africans out of political life. We know that they, pumped crack cocaine into the African community. So they drugged an entire people and pushed them out of political life, now we're up on drugs, or we're selling drugs, and now we're in prison and all these different kinds of things. And also they hoisted up the black petty bourgeoisie, which was really damning, because the struggle for black power was now hijacked to a struggle for a seat on the bus. It was a struggle for what black people were fighting for, a right to vote, when we were talking about fighting for black power, and a black power agenda was now, when that whole agenda was crushed, now the black petty bourgeoisie gets to define what the agenda is. Now white power has indirect rule over the struggle of African people through the petty bourgeoisie. And so this was another, assault on the black revolution, and it exists today. We see it today, the effects of neo-colonialism, white power in blackface, and the African petty bourgeoisie. And so, in terms of how the party was able to survive the counterinsurgency, again, a part of learning all these things is learning the successes of the Black Power movement and the different contradictions that existed during this era. And there were a lot of contradictions within the Black Power movement. Again, it was some of this stuff was never done before. And so it was figuring out how to make these different things happen. We didn't have a solid political theory. It was all over the place. We were borrowing from Marx, borrowing from all of these different places, the religious obscurantism, and all of these things that really plagued our people in our struggle. And so the party, learned from the successes, the contradictions of the Black Power movement, and then began to solve the problems of the revolution. And, it developed this theory that we've talked about, African internationalism, which is the worldview of the African working class. And after our movement went without our own theory, as I mentioned, and borrowing from all these places, so now we were able to sum up what had happened to our struggle. What the hell just happened to the Black Revolution of the 60s? What are we looking at when we looked at the counterinsurgency? So now we were able to sum this up. We were able to analyze the state of our movement. Where are we now? What are we looking at? And because then we have to say, okay, well, how are we going to organize? And then the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the last man standing, the man that never gave up, the one who Huey P. Newton in the Oakland Uhuru House in the 80s said, I'm passing the torch, and it's the Uhuru movement that's going to take us out, and Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and he did it. He did it. He developed the theory of African internationalism and took us out of the defeat and brought us into the future. And then, we had, as a result of solving the problems of the revolution, we had the development of the African People's Socialist Party. And, a lot of other organizations, came together to form the African People's Socialist Party as a result of, the work that was just continuing to happen. And then a part of these critical questions was the development of our economic institutions fighting for dual and contending power, as Chairman coined the term and introduced it to the world. And even developing an organization like the African Socialist International, which is the international expression of the African People's Socialist Party, which brings our entire nation under one banner, under the vanguard, the Advanced Attachments leadership. And, and even the consolidation of an organization like the African People's Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement that had, where the white left was collaborating, with its own ruling class, pretending to rub elbows and love Africans so much. They collaborated with their own ruling class as a part of the defeat of the Black Revolution of the 60s. And, so it was Chairman who summed up, because there were many different explanations for why white people did what they did and do what they do. And Chairman came up with white people are people. And, this is how we have to deal with the situation. We untapped, we tapped into this pool of resources that is hoarded into the white community to be able to bring those resources, those stolen resources from Africa and African people, and bring them to the African Revolution to be able to forward the projects and institutions that we have even today and during this discussion. And so it's unprecedented, African People's Solidarity Committee and subsequently the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. All of these things led to, defending the revolution, as a result of the counterinsurgency. And we can say that everything it is that they did, that the U.S. government did and continues to do to African and colonized people around the world to try to maintain itself, it failed. It failed. Chairman Mali Chatela's existence on the planet is a consequence of the failure of the U.S. government to defeat the Black Revolution. So the murder of Malcolm X, he did not go in vain, because Chairman Mali Chatela lives, and the Black Revolution lives in us and everything it is that we're doing today. So, that was, briefly counterinsurgency and, why we're here today.
Director Akilé Anai.
I just really appreciate that. I think that's extremely powerful and important. And just the last point that you were touching on, Director Akilé, that the formation of the Solidarity Movement, the African People's Solidarity Committee, is part of the a new front that the party opened up as part of the strategic response to the counterinsurgency. It's part of how the party survived the counterinsurgency, like you're saying. And I think for any white people who are in this talk show tonight watching, just to understand that, how deep that is, that we're not just in a solidarity committee supporting the Uhuru movement. So that we're actually a part of the strategy of the African Revolution that was created in part to ensure that the revolution would survive. That's just such an important responsibility that we have as white people in this movement, to understand part of our job. And because part of how they tried to attack the revolution was by cutting off resources and things like that. And that's why we have to turn over the resources hoarded in the white community to the revolution and be a supply line, just constantly bringing in reparations from the oppressor nation. So on that note, before we go to our next question, I want to thank some of you who are watching tonight, including Comrade Ella in St. Louis, who put in $5. Uhuru. We also want to thank the Secretary General of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Allison Haney, who put in $25. Uhuru to Secretary General Ali. And our very own Chairwoman Penny Hess, who put in $25 as well. Uhuru to Chairwoman Penny. So that means we've raised $160, $340 left to go to reach our goal tonight towards the Black Power Blueprint.
Let's go.
And we're so honored to have Director Akilé with us on the program tonight, talking about the assassination of Malcolm X and how the struggle continues to this very day. So,
and Chair Jesse, if I just may for a moment remind folks that if you want to be like Chairwoman Penny Hess, you want to be like Secretary General Ali, please go to blackpowerblueprint.org and make your stance of material solidarity with African liberation tonight. We've got $340 to go. Everything that Director Aquila has laid out is happening. It's a material reality, and the life or death of African people, the life or death of the struggle of colonized people, and indeed the world itself rests on this question. So be like these comrades and make your stance at blackpowerblueprint.org tonight.
We just need someone right now to go and put in $40 so we can knock it down to $300, and then we'll keep chipping away at it from there. So
we know it can happen.
Thank you to everyone who has contributed so far and who has contributed in the past. So I know we had a clip. We had a second clip. We're going to skip to the third one if that's not okay. That's cool. All right. So Malcolm X spoke at Oxford Union 2 months before he was murdered. So we want to show a clip of the brilliant presentation that Malcolm X gave. And then when we come back, we'll be speaking with you, Director Akilé, about the appearance that Chairman Omali Chatela made before the Oxford Union. So let's go to a clip of Malcolm X speaking at Oxford Union in 1964.
The most famous debating societies in the world. And on his feet at this moment, Malcolm X, one of the leaders of the black Muslims in America. Let's, for a moment, just hear a little of what he's saying.
You make my point. That as long as a white man does it, it's all right. A black man is supposed to have no feelings. But when a black man strikes back, he's an extremist. He's supposed to sit passively and have no feelings, be nonviolent, and love his enemy. No matter what kind of attack, be it verbal or otherwise, he's supposed to take it. But if he stands up and in any way tries to defend himself, then he's an extremist. No, I think that the day that the black man takes an uncompromising step and realizes that he's within his rights, when his own freedom is being jeopardized, to use any means necessary to bring about his freedom or put a halt to that injustice, I don't think he'll be by himself. I live in America where there are only 22 million blacks against probably 160 million whites. One of the reasons that I am in no way reluctant or hesitant to do whatever is necessary to see that black people do something to protect themselves, I honestly believe that the day that they do, many whites will have more respect for them, and that there will be more whites on their side than are now on their side with these little wishy-washy love thy enemy approach that they've been using up to now. And if I'm wrong, then you are racialist. Anytime you live in a society supposedly based upon law, and it doesn't enforce its own law because the color of a man's skin happens to be wrong, then I say those people are justified to resort to any means necessary to bring about justice where the government can't give them justice.
I read once, passingly, about a man named Shakespeare. I only read about him passingly, but I remember one thing he wrote that kind of moved me. He put it in the mouth of Hamlet, I think it was, who said, "To be or not to be." He was in doubt about something. Whether it was nobler in the mind of man to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, moderation, or to take up arms against the sea of troubles and by opposing, end them. And I go for that. If you take up arms, you'll end it. But if you sit around and wait for the one who's in power to make up his mind that he should end it, you'll be waiting a long time. And in my opinion, the young generation of whites, blacks, browns, whatever else there is, you're living at a time of extremism, a time of revolution, a time when there's got to be a change. People in power have misused it, and now there has to be a change, and a better world has to be built, and the only way it's going to be built is with extreme methods. And I, for one, will join in with anyone, don't care what color you are, as long as you want to change this miserable condition that exists on this earth. Thank you.
Uhuru, long live Malcolm X. So that was Malcolm X speaking at Oxford Union. And shout out to the 30 people watching this web talk show tonight between Facebook and YouTube, to all of our loyal viewers who tune in every week. We appreciate you. Thank you for being here on either YouTube or Facebook. We know there's people tuning in on both. And if everybody watching right now went in and put in $10, we would be almost at our goal. So go ahead. No amount is too small or too large. Contribute at blackpowerblueprint.org to support the economic independence and self-determination of the African working class in St. Louis and around the world. So that was Malcolm X speaking at Oxford Union. And Director Aquila, your department that you lead, the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, released a documentary recently that showed this speech, or some of it, along with a very powerful speech that we'll see a little bit of in just a minute, delivered by Chairman Omali Yeshitela at Oxford Union. What was the significance of Malcolm and Chairman Omali having been asked to speak at Oxford Union, which Chairman referred to in his speech as the pinnacle of bourgeois academia? Could you talk to us about that?
Yes, so both were very powerful presentations, both Malcolm's, and I'm really excited that we'll get to show people Chairman's. And just the significance of, bourgeois Oxford, inviting somebody like Malcolm X, who represented a new era of the Black liberation struggle, and then, 55 years later, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, after the crushing defeat of the revolution by the U.S. government, it speaks to the era that we're in. And, at the time where, the bourgeois ideas were crumbling, white power is being defeated ideologically in this country and around the world as a result of the struggles by oppressed peoples to, take the system off of our backs. And so, you have an institution who this is it pumps out the thinking representatives of the bourgeoisie then and today. And usually they have these discussions, there's the decorum and all of these things, and they have discussions about African people and our future and everything without us being there. That's always how they've done it. And, or they, talk about these senseless things that, don't matter to, anyone except for them. And then you have a situation where you bring Black power into the room. You bring Black power into Oxford, which is something that had never been done. Black power had never entered into Oxford Union, let alone the discussion. And so Malcolm X brought that, and then 55 years later, Oxford, or 55 years, Oxford saw the same drought of, you know, Black power not being present in the venue, and then Chairman Omali Yeshitela is being requested to participate in the debate. And it was really telling because even in the letter to Chairman about acknowledging, you know, his contributions to the world through African internationalism, which is really significant because, and long overdue, because African internationalism has, you know, been on this planet for over 40 years. And so this invitation comes, you know, very late in the game because the bourgeoisie has already gone and used African internationalism, you know, in various ways, has stolen, you know, different concepts and ideas that Chairman and the party have put forth. And, you know, and the petty bourgeoisie has, you know, have done it, and they always do it. And of course, Chairman says we're the vanguard, so that's bound to happen. You know, you hear people talking about dual and contending power without referencing where it even comes from, that it didn't exist, you know, until Chairman spoke of it. And you even have situations like how the party organized a funeral for Huey P. Newton, never was acknowledged, you know, has never been acknowledged in this process. Had Huey spoke at the Uhuru House and passed the torch to Uhuru, never spoke of it. But, you know, people have, you know, used the things that Chairman has put out into the world to forward their own agendas. And so now it's a situation where African internationalism is being recognized as a real contending theory out there that can contend with white power. Where white power isn't even able to sum up its own self to people anymore, to rationalize it and make it make sense, and where African internationalism is able to step in and help everything, put everything in perspective and make the picture very clear. And so, you know, it's a recognition, like I said, of the fact that African internationalism is a contending theory with white power, but it also, just in terms of what Chairman was asked to debate about, which was, you know, the question of a closer African union. And Chairman went in and he was debating all of these faces of neo-colonialism, and including people who were supposedly on his team. He had this, you know, man who had his flag, his American flag pin, and his, what is it called, jopfus and things like that, and, you know, and he's promoting himself with America. And then you have a former deputy prime minister of Zimbabwe. These people are killers, you know. These people are suit and ties and they're smiling and they're lethal. And so, but these are the people that are on his side, and they talk about a closer African union, but they don't mean what we mean when we say a closer African union. And Chairman specifies it needs to be a closer African union, but it's going to take revolution in order to make it happen. It has to be a union under the leadership of the African working class. And it was a recognition of Chairman's, you know, of the theory of African internationalism in regards to our question on, we are one African people, we are one nation. And that was evident in the fact that they had Chairman Omali Yeshitela, born in the U.S., to talk about the question of an ever closer African union. So it justified our position on this question. And so it was, you know, it was very, very important. It was extremely significant, and seeing Chairman up there uncompromising in his line, you know, standing up for and representing, you know, the African working class all around the world. He's in London, you know, which is the place that has taken all of, you know, Africa's resources and has, you know, has had empires and colonies in these different places around in Africa itself. And, you know, sitting on all that stolen loot, everything it is that they know, they even think they know, is, you know, it's come as a consequence of what they have done to African people. And to be able to say, you, you know, the British, London, England, you did it. You are a part of the reason why Africa is divided today, why we even have to have this discussion, is because of what you did. And he says it in that room. And, you know, it was, you know, absolutely amazing. I don't have to, that's kind of obvious. But,
so who won?
Well, that was,
obvious
yes, it was
answer.
A very obvious winner. It was Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And, you know, it was a victory for the African working class. So, yeah.
So let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at Chairman Omali Yeshitela, and go watch the whole documentary. You should see it on youtube.com/theburningspear TV. Okay, there you go. Check that out, and let's take a look at Chairman Omali Yeshitela. at Oxford Union.
Divided. We know it's true. We saw 100 years or so ago, Marcus Garvey organized the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities Leagues that stretched across the globe. More than 11 million African people everywhere were connected to this. Africa for Africans, at home and abroad. That was the cry. Not Africans for Nigerians that didn't even exist until the British created it in 1915. And Flora Shaw, the mistress who would become the wife of Frederick Lugard, came up with the name nigger area. Not this false national consciousness that has been imposed on Africans around the world, so that when the Portuguese found shrimp on West Africa and then named it for the Portuguese word for shrimp, Cameroon, it is not true that they are shrimp despite the fact that the people call themselves Cameroonians today. It is a false national consciousness. The false national consciousness that created the American Negro, that created the Black Brit, and the Afro-Swede. We are one Africa, one nation, and we must have closer union. But in order for that to happen, it has to be a revolutionary union. The Organization of African Union, created on May 25th, 1963 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, was part of an effort to circumvent efforts by Kwame Nkrumah to build a single union of African states. And instead, we come up with an Organization of African Union that codified the colonial borders that were created by Europe in 1884 and 85. We have to be able to break out of this, but it's going to take revolution in order to do this. African revolution in order to do this. African revolution that will destroy imperialism and the world economy that's responsible for the growing immiseration of the masses of people around the world. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman Omali. Long live Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Long live.
Uhuru. That was the chairman speaking at Oxford Union. And
the one and only.
Destroying all opposition and even the other people on his side.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a statement from Chairwoman Penny Hess, who contributed to the goal tonight. Salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the African People's Socialist Party carrying out the legacy of Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey. The vanguard, keeping the African Revolution alive, reparations to African people. Uhuru, Chairwoman Penny.
Uhuru.
And be like Chairwoman Penny. Send in a statement. Go to blackpowerblueprint.org. And we want to thank you. We want to thank you on the air. We want to shout out your name, but we can't do it until you go to blackpowerblueprint.org. Get out your wallet. Get out your credit card, your debit card, and go ahead and put in your contribution. It's easy, it's user-friendly, and we will announce it on the air. So we still have $340 left to raise tonight, and when we say we mean everyone who's watching. We are going to do this. We are going to make this happen together. So go ahead and let's do this. So Uhuru, and you know what? Should I announce my donation? Yeah, I'm going to hold off on that.
Well,
all right, before I get to that. No, go ahead, Jamie.
I just want to unite with what Jesse's laying out and really express appreciation for the approximate 30 people who we know are tuned in at the moment. But we also know a couple of things. One, that this video will continue to be spread tonight and further into the future. And if you're watching at any time, you can go to blackpowerblueprint.org and express your unity with African people's right to have self-determination and access to their own resources by doing so. And I really appreciated earlier when Director Akilé Anai of the African People's Socialist Party pointed out that Chairman Omali Yeshitela was one of the first, or the first African Black Power revolutionary to state that white people are people. As quietly as it's kept, we are human beings and we can be one. So that means not just those of us who are used to watching these webinars, these talk shows, but if you have a friend, a colleague, a coworker, a cousin, an uncle, a mother, a father that perhaps you haven't talked about this question of the liberation of African people to for a couple of years. This may be the exact time to share this video. This may be the exact time to bring them in and say, you know, I want a future for you, for me, for our entire family, and we know that it is not in this system. Our future is tied up with African revolution. As white people, as much as it is for African people, we have a stake in this. So if you agree with that, I'm calling on people to not only donate, but to reach out, spread this video far and wide, and make sure that as many people as possible have a chance to see the truth, that it's the African People's Socialist Party that has forced the question of reparations and African liberation into the global spotlight. And we have to seize this time. So I really appreciate everyone who has done that so far, and encourage you to continue going to blackpowerblueprint.org and make your stance of material solidarity with African liberation.
Uhuru, make your stance material solidarity like Valerie Bronte, who put in $28.
Yes.
Uhuru. Valerie, you probably know Valerie from the weekly Solidarity Spear Studies that she leads online. So shout out to Comrade Valerie, and I like that number 28.
Yes.
That's interesting. I like that, and I'm inspired. I'm gonna go ahead and put in how about this, $87. $87. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So Uhuru. So what does that bring us to? What's 188 plus 87? This is a calculator here, and that brings us to $275 that we've raised tonight, which means we have another $225 left to raise. We can do it. We're more than halfway there, so let's keep it going. BlackPowerBlueprint.org.
We have faith in you. And while you're doing that, while you're going to your friends, your family, your colleagues, your comrades, and letting them know this is happening, that there's a way that you can change the world by going to blackpowerblueprint.org, we still have Director Akilé Anai of the African People's Socialist Party to discuss this question of the African People's Socialist Party. So, Director Aquila, at its first Congress in 1981, the African People's Socialist Party adopted a resolution to initiate an annual African Martyrs Day, a commemoration on February 21st. Could you talk to us about what African Martyrs Day is, what its significance is of upholding African martyrs, and how did the party expand and deepen the definition of what it means to be a martyr for colonized people?
So, as mentioned, you know, the party institutionalized African Martyrs Day. And you look around the white world, and they have holidays for all of the befallen white people who have fought to uphold colonialism, imperialism, and parasitic capitalism. And it's taught in our books, and you know, African children have to digest this information about how these two are our heroes, and this is what we have to look up to, and you know, and so who really does represent African people in our struggle for freedom? And it certainly can't be the George Washingtons and the Thomas Jeffersons and the you know, the Leopolds and you know, people like that who white people celebrate, have statues of, and plaques and all of these things in the world. So who is it that African people can look to? And beyond the people that we famously know, like people like even like Malcolm X, people like Martin Luther King, we know those names, there's really big names. But, and the Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Louisa Kinshasa, wrote a really amazing article about African Liberation Day, the history of it, and you know, why do we celebrate it, what is it? And he says that this struggle, the struggle that African people have been engaged in for national liberation, is the longest national liberation struggle the world has ever seen. And in the process of this long national liberation struggle, African people have lost so many Africans who have fought in this fight. There are people we don't know whose names we'll never know. From, you know, the resistance that, you know, Africans partook in when Europe first stepped foot in Africa and, you know, began to bring us onto ships. There were Africans fighting back. The Africans who went overboard, you know, Africans who were constantly engaged in struggle to, you know, to never be a part of white power, this vicious, unnatural social system that has appeared on the planet. You know, Africans have always been engaged in fighting back. And so there's I mean, the list goes on in terms of how many people have gone in a result of Africans fighting back. And, but it's not just that they're dead and they're gone, but these people are heroes and they've brought us one step closer to freedom, and that's how they need to be looked at, because what white power does is they use death as a weapon. They use it as, they call it the weapon of fear. Death, you fear death. You're supposed to be afraid of dying. And when you kill Malcolm X the way you kill Malcolm X, just like you kill Mike Brown, how they killed Mike Brown, you don't want anything to do with it because you've been taught to fear death, and now you have to be afraid of it. And if death is the only thing standing between you and freedom, well, damn, I don't want that. So you don't want freedom. And that's what white power has been able to do. But celebrating the African martyr and celebrating the fact that these Africans were courageous enough to stand up and to fight back is something that is admirable, something that we wish to strive to be, to emulate. This is a stance that we want to take. And so the party took this African Martyrs Day and made it a thing to uphold, to say this is who we celebrate, this is who we love, this is who we admire, and we want to be just like them. And no matter what the costs are, there is no greater cost than what it is that Africans have already lost in this process of being colonized. And so that is why we've taken the weapon of fear out of the hands of white power. So the only person who has to fear death is white power. The only person who has to fear death is white power, because the death is inevitable. And so we don't have to fear it anymore. And that, all Africans killed under colonialism are African martyrs. And that it takes this whole, thing that, African martyrs are like I don't know, like almost like deifying, African martyrs and things like that. It's real. It's the brother down the street. It's the sister, locked in prison. It's the Sandra Blands. It's the Corinne Gaines. It's all these Africans who are African martyrs as well. It's the African working class who, the police gun down every single day, who they starve in these different places. That's who the African martyrs. It's the people who, and the Africans in Congo who had their hands and their limbs chopped off and continue to, suffer brutal assault and murder today, so that white power can take the coltan out of Congo to be able to afford their cell phones and their computers and things like that. Those are African martyrs. It's the people who are engaged in continuous struggle, and the Africans who, will never know that die as a result of being colonized. The ones who have high blood pressure and diabetes and die in that situation, and, just the unthinkable deaths that African people go through. White people can expect either to die of an overdose or die in their sleep. And Africans have all these ways to die under white power. And so we recognize these Africans as our martyrs as well. And but that was the purpose of it, and to never forget them, to recognize them, and now we have somebody to celebrate and uphold and fight to be like. So.
Uhuru. Very, very powerful. Brilliant. So we have a few more questions, so if we are cool with sticking around a little bit longer, we appreciate that. And thank you so much again to Director Aquila for being on tonight. It's been an amazing interview, but it's not over, so don't go anywhere. We want to thank Renee Nassar, who put in $10, Uhuru, Comrade Renee, and to Comrade Jackson Hollingsworth, who put in $10 as well. Uhuru Jackson. That means we've raised $295, and we have $205 to go. So if somebody wants to put in 10 more bucks, that'll bring us down to $195, and then we'll just keep whittling away at that, and then get it under 100, and then we'll be done. So
or
let's
there's
keep
someone
going.
out there with $205.
Exactly. Every dollar counts. Yeah. Every dollar goes a long way in this movement. Yes. This is the African working class, that every resource becomes an institution, becomes something very profound. So.
And it's a statement, too, to the system. Every dollar, as you stated so eloquently, Director Aquila.
Yes, exactly.
Comes at the expense of white power.
$205, that is like a weekend for white people hanging out, blood
on the
cash
cheap.
On. Exactly. So go ahead and do it. $205 to the Black Power Blueprint, $205, an investment in a world without oppression, a positive future in which all human beings can live. So, Director Aquila, Malcolm X gave a famous speech called The Ballot or the Bullet. And more recently, the party, the African People's Socialist Party, has updated that slogan to say the ballot and the bullet, which is, signifying that all arenas of struggle should be seized upon by the African working class to advance the revolutionary struggle for national liberation. And right now, something very interesting is happening. If you read the news, you'll see that there are a number of presidential candidates in the Democratic Party who have come out in support of reparations to the black community. Does this sound familiar to you? Are you aware of any candidates that have run in the past on a reparations-based platform?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So I did happen to read the article, and I've seen the different instances of presidential candidates coming out in favor of reparations to African people, or some form, as Kamala Harris likes to characterize it. And it does remind me of
ring a bell, maybe.
A campaign that we did here in St. Petersburg, Florida, called Unity Through Reparations, actually. And Obama, who actually intervened and endorsed the Democratic Party candidate to ensure that the reparations candidates would win. And we couldn't even get the white Jewish mayoral candidate who was running for office here to unite with reparations to African people, despite Jewish people getting reparations. But anyway, so yeah, it is familiar, but that's because the party and the Uhuru movement have bust this question of reparations wide open. And so now the bourgeoisie has to deal with it in order to get the African vote. You have to talk about reparations now, which wasn't a thing. You didn't have to talk about reparations. Chairman said we were the ones people threw rocks at. When we mentioned it, we were the crazy people. And now everybody has to talk about reparations. And the African working class, the party has responsibility to really deepen and understand, because these candidates are saying that they support reparations, and they have an idea of what that is, and so that's why they don't actually unite with the idea of reparations, because if they did, they know that there would be no president of the United States.
Oh, for real. And yeah, for those who were confused by my question, it was phrased in a semi-joking manner because, of course, we're looking at the original reparations candidate right here, Director Aquila, who ran for City Council District 6 here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and we are very interested in talking more about this. We're going to be actually going into it on Reparations in Action this Friday, our radio show at 12 o'clock, to talk more about what this is all about with these Democrats saying that they support reparations. So thank you for answering that as well.
No problem.
Back over to you, Jamie.
So don't forget to tune in, as Jesse mentioned, to Reparations in Action this Friday at noon on Black Power 96.3 LPFM WBPU here in St. Petersburg. And back to the question that we want to address to Director Aquila. So Malcolm X began increasingly to identify openly with socialism towards the final years of his life before his assassination. So he openly also condemned capitalism. And another thing you see happening today is the bourgeois or ruling class, liberal Democrats from Bernie to Alexandria Cortez, calling themselves democratic socialists. This is a new buzzword. And stating that you can be a so-called socialist and capitalist at the same time. So what do you think Malcolm would have said were he here today and could hear this statement?
It's hard to imagine what Malcolm would say first. Obviously, as a person who condemned capitalism and moved closer to socialism and understanding what those things are and what capitalism is, there's no way in hell you could support capitalism. There's no good capitalism. There is no capitalism that works for African people. There's no form of capitalism that is not extracting the resources from Africa and various places around the world. There's no capitalism that isn't killing Africans and other colonized and oppressed people. And so I imagine every position that he had against capitalism in his day, he would make those known now. I have a few unfavorable words for this kind of sentiment and the fact that it, anyway. So just in terms of what Malcolm would say, I think he would say what we would say, which is that it's whatever they're calling themselves. I guess it is possible to be a democratic socialist and a capitalist at the same time because they're the same thing. So,
Uhuru, thank you so much, Director Aquila. This has been an incredible interview, and we really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you on this program and your leadership in the African People's Socialist Party. The Burning Spear newspaper is amazing, an amazing publication for how many years?
50 years.
50 years.
50
so
years.
Unbelievable, and it's a beautiful newspaper, and just everything that the Department of Agitation Propaganda does is so incredible. So uhuru, and we want to shout out Ruby Gittleson in Philadelphia. And before I even get there, shout out to all the comrades in Philadelphia in the Solidarity Movement and beyond who just had an amazing All Diamonds Are Blood Diamonds event. Shout out to Secretary General Allison Haney, ANWO President Yejide Ramila, Connor Voss, Hallie Murray, and Micah, and many others who were a big part of making that happen. It was amazing in Philly, in New York, and Boston to expose the blood diamond industry. We did a web event on that as well. So anyway, shout out to Ruby in particular for putting in $25 towards our goal tonight. Ruby. So that just cracked through the 200 mark. So now we're at 180 left to go. Somebody just put in 80, and then we'll deal with the last 100 together. We'll do it. We'll make it happen. So let's do this. We have some announcements, but please interrupt us while we're giving the announcements.
Yes.
Just keep interrupting us by going to blackpowerblueprint.org. We want to shout you out. We want to thank you. And we can't do that unless you go to blackpowerblueprint.org and actually put in your contribution tonight. That's what I was doing. If you saw me click-clacking away over here on my laptop, that's what I was doing. I put in my $87. So go ahead and put in your reparations. And, you know, we talk about capitalism, and we know that the world is divided into two realities because of parasitic capitalism. That there's the reality of the white experience. You know, we have social wealth, we have opportunities. You know, our biggest problem most of the time is we have student loan debt, and that becomes our big issue, is trying to get our student loan debt relieved or something like that. And then there's the other reality, which is what African people are forced to experience, just the horror and pain and suffering that is unimaginable to any white person on this planet, and that there is a relationship between those two realities. And as we talked about on previous programs, you know, on this show, that white people have to find that reality intolerable. It has to torment us. It has to make us sick that we are a tiny percentage of the world population just engorging ourselves, just nourishing ourselves off of the resources of the vast majority of the people on the planet Earth.
Yeah.
That's the reality of the world today, and we just take it for granted. We just think it's normal. We just accept it as normal, and we have to reject that. We have to be haunted by it and horrified by it, and beyond just experiencing those emotions, we have to do something about it. We have to build a movement for reparations to African people. That's what the African People's Socialist Party has called upon us to do, given us a clear assignment to extend the African Revolution into the colonizer society, into imperialism, into the belly of the beast, and rip every other white person that we can out of the complicity with white power and into the Black Power movement under the leadership of the African Revolution. So that's what this is about. So if you're a white person who's watching, who wants to be able to join the rest of humanity and be a revolutionary and be an African internationalist, join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and go to blackpowerblueprint.org and contribute towards the goal tonight. We only have how much? 180. 180. We can do that, right?
Yeah, it's like making a 180-degree turn.
Exactly.
Right?
We got a 180-degree turn till victory.
Yeah.
Somehow that makes sense. So go ahead at blackpowerblueprint.org and put in your $180 or your $18. So uhuru. So anything else you wanted to say, Director Aquila?
Uhuru, I mean, I just wanted to, again, really appreciate this discussion that was had today, and, you know, to call on African people to become a part of this project, to become a part of the Black Power Blueprint by donating to this thing that, as mentioned, is an assault on everything it is that attacks us on a daily basis, that we as African people experience the worst kinds of conditions. I mean, that, you know, we often hear the thing about slavery that doesn't exist today, and it's such a long time ago, and the fact of the matter is Africans today are experiencing, you know, nothing has gotten better for African people. If not, it's gotten worse for African people. and it just gets more violent. And we have the ability now to be a part of something that is going to crush this entire thing. And so it's our responsibility. This is our responsibility. The liberation of African people is on African people. We have to take it there. And so we have to contribute to it. We have to contribute to the Black Power Blueprint, which is this amazing economic project in the, the north, the north side community of St. Louis, which is the African working class, right there, where nobody goes, where no black politicians go. Obama didn't step foot there. Kamala Harris isn't going there. Cory Booker's not going there. The Uhuru movement went there, ground zero into this community, and rose up from the ashes. That was Ferguson. And all of those Africans who were out there, all of the work that they did, and even the ones that the government assassinated in that process, all of that hard work now is represented in the Black Power Blueprint, and you have to contribute to it. You have to contribute to this amazing project that put the Uhuru House right there in the center, that offers us the ability to have our events, and also allows us to plan out the future of Africa and African people. And then this amazing Uhuru Jiko kitchen, commercial kitchen, and cafe and bakery. I mean, controlling the means of production of food and distribution of food. You know how big that is, especially when we look at the the crisis of the health in our community, because that's another assault that white power makes when they put these disgusting the fast food joints or no joints at all in the African community. And now we have the ability to to control the means of production of the food, distribution, get to create ourselves, learn to grow it ourselves, and work in our own institutions. We don't got to go out anywhere and do anything for white people. We can bring it all back into our community, but you have to make that a reality. You got to donate to the Black Power Blueprint. United with what you heard today, then this is what you need to do. This is the next step: unity and action. Take the next step and donate to blackpowerblueprint.org today.
Brilliant. I was very inspired by that, and I was also very inspired by a contribution that came in from Ali Aiello of $100. So that's the spirit. And those two things, that contribution and Director Aquila's powerful statement inspired me. I'm going to round up my 87 to 100, so I'm putting in another 13, which means we have 67 left to raise.
Whoa.
$67.
Wow.
We are so close to making our goal tonight. So go blackpowerblueprint.org, and as we go through our announcements, again, keep interrupting us. Keep making, shout out to Comrade Amanda, our math whiz here, who is keeping the numbers calculated and texting us every time another contribution comes in. So keep it coming, and let's go ahead into our announcements, shall we?
Certainly.
Comrade James.
All right, so February and March, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is holding the national tour, All Diamonds Are Blood Diamonds, Africa's Resources in African Hands, Reparations Now. And you can get event and registration information at uhurusolidarity.org. That's uhurusolidarity.org, with more events being announced by the day and featuring leaders of the African People's Socialist Party and African People's Solidarity Committee. The next event is here in St. Petersburg, Florida, from where we're filming right now, on March 14th at the beautiful Uhuru House in Aquaba Hall. You can RSVP at blooddiamondsstpete.eventbrite.com. Again, that's blooddiamondsstpete.eventbrite.com. And there's still time to volunteer to help with the national All Diamonds Are Blood Diamonds tour by emailing info@uhurusolidarity.org, expressing your interest. Find an event in your area by going to uhurusolidarity.org. And if you didn't know, Uhuru is spelled U-H-U-R-U, and it is Swahili for freedom.
Uhuru, and I just put in my $13 contribution. And did you know that when you contribute, a video pops up that you only get to see if you donate at blackpowerblueprint.org. So I'm not going to play it for you, but it's a beautiful video featuring Deputy Chair Onozane Shatella. And if you want to know what she has to say to you after you make a contribution, you got to go blackpowerblueprint.org and help us get to $500 tonight, because we're only $67 away. 67. So go ahead, blackpowerblueprint.org. I know that the people watching this don't want to see this web event end with $67 left to raise. Like, how random. So go ahead, blackpowerblueprint.org, and put in your reparations tonight. And Director Akilé, actually, maybe we can turn this one over to you. Do you want to announce the March 10th event with the chairman?
Oh, yes. Oh, okay. So, yes, the March 10th event is an evening with Chairman Omali Yeshitela, which is a discussion and a screening of the Oxford debate at Oxford, London. So it is going to feature presentations from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, Chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess. And so we'll have live discussion. People can ask questions about, what happened, and then we'll be showing a screening of the documentary that we've been talking about today. And there's going to be refreshments and things of that nature. It starts at 3 p.m. on March 10th. That's Sunday, right at Aquaba Hall, 1245 Tauron Lewis Avenue South, or otherwise known as 18th. So it's going to be a very beautiful event. I'm very excited. So
can't miss that.
Looking forward to that one.
We'll be there.
Yeah.
The Uhuru movement is nonstop. Like, this is a huge movement.
Yeah.
It's a huge movement. Every week, every day, every hour, there's something amazing going on across the world. So March 23rd and 24th in St. Louis, the African National Women's Organization, whose president, Yejide Oranmila, I mentioned earlier, has been a speaker on the Blood Diamonds Tour, very powerful leader in this movement on the National Central Committee as well, will be holding their national plenary or planning conference at the St. Louis Uhuru House at 4101 West Florissant. So, see, we're raising resources for the Black Power Blueprint, whose first project is now used to have conferences of the African National Women's Organization. So you see where the money goes right there. Go to anwauhuru.org for more information. And here in St. Pete, at the St. Pete Uhuru House, is the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations that is holding its third electoral school. So you want to understand why there are now Democratic Party presidential candidates talking about reparations? Come hear Chairman Omali Yeshitela talk about it. April 6th and 7th here in St. Petersburg, and you can register at blackisbackcoalition.org. And May 26th and 27th is African Liberation Day in Washington, D.C. More info to come. And before I stop hogging all the announcements, I will say a few more. Pre-order Chairman Omali Yeshitela's new book, Vanguard, The Advanced Detachment of the African Revolution, at burningspearmarketplace.com. Gotta pre-order your copy.
You have a couple more days in February, and you get a signature from Chairman Omali Yeshitela, an autograph, and you also get a color photo spread. So you have to order within the month of February in order to get those exclusive features. And then after that, the book is gonna be good too. But you just don't get that stuff. So you got 2 more days.
I gotta get my order in.
Yes.
An extra 2 days, a reprieve.
2 days.
Yes.
Okay.
And if you want to be as stylish and on point as Chair Jesse is here with his threads, we want to encourage people to not that your threads aren't amazing as well, Director Aquila, but in particular regarding the All Diamonds Are Blood Diamonds pamphlet, which you can order at planetuhuru.com. We are encouraging people to get the Stolen from Africa t-shirts. This is a must-have if you are somebody that supports reparations. This puts it in black and white. This is unambiguous. It lays out all of the mineral wealth, the cotton, the human resources, everything that has been stolen from Africa that must go back. And you can get a t-shirt like that at planetuhuru.com. And following that, of course, April 13th and 14th.
What's happening on April 13th and 14th?
Happening at a facility funded by or provided by the Black Power Blueprint, which you can help us support at blackpowerblueprint.org. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement is holding its national convention at the St. Louis Uhuru House. I almost said St. Petersburg because it's so much habit.
Saints.
It's yet another saint that has been taken into the liberated territory of the Uhuru movement. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement 2019 National Convention is the highest meeting body of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement to gain leadership directly from Chairman Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee, and Chair Jesse Neville of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and African People's Solidarity Committee. The weekend program will be packed with presentations, culture, food, and discussions on a wide variety of topics and hot issues. And of course, at the core of this is going to be the question of reparations. So please register at USM 2019. That's USM 2019 convention.eventbrite.com.
Uhuru. And I just want to say, if you're a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement and you haven't been to a USM National Convention, you have to be there. You have to come. You have to come to St. Louis. You have to see the Uhuru House. You have to hear Chairman Amalia Yeshitela speak in person. You have to see Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela. You have to see the amazing African People's Socialist Party. And you have to have the experience of being in a room and looking around and seeing a whole bunch of white people and thinking to yourself, wow, all these white people are here because they want to pay reparations to African people like me. They think like I do. They want to support, they want to stand on the right side of history. It's an amazing experience, and it just makes you appreciate the genius of the strategy of the African People's Socialist Party to create another front of the revolution inside the white society. So you got to be there. Uhuru Solidarity Movement National Convention in St. Louis, April 13th and 14th.
Just, I can't imagine what I would have done to be able to see Malcolm X.
Yep, exactly.
To have been able to see Patrice Lumumba, to have been able to see Marcus Garvey. Right. Now is your chance.
Yes,
Chairman Amalia Yeshitela lives. Long live Chairman Amalia. Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela lives and is leading currently, and you can get direct leadership from these comrades, including Chairwoman Penny Hess at this convention. So I really unite with what Chair Jesse is saying about this convention and how important it is to attend it. Other announcements include Uhuru Furniture and Collectibles is holding its bi-weekly meetings to build the 2019 Uhuru Health Festival. You can join that committee at apedf.org. That's the African People's Education and Defense Fund, apedf.org.
And we want to pretty much close out in just a minute here. We know we've kept you a little longer than you may have been expecting to be here, but you're still here, and we appreciate that. And we appreciate Director Aquila as well for that. But we want to announce, I just wanted to say real quick that on Wednesday night, I don't have the information in front of me right now, but you should go to apedf.org, go to the Facebook pages of the Uhuru Furniture Store in Philadelphia. And there's going to be an event Wednesday night called a Forum on African Self-Determination in Philadelphia that is going to feature Tucharwa Masimba of the African People's Socialist Party and Mike Africa, who is the son of one of the members of the MOVE organization that was bombed in Philadelphia in the 80s and whose parents were imprisoned for 40 years, and he was born from his pregnant mother while she was in prison. So he's going to be speaking there as well, and we want to encourage all of our members and supporters in Philadelphia or in that area to go to that event as well. So we are coming to the end of our program, but any other remarks from you, Director Akilé, before we adjourn this amazing event?
I don't have anything. Thank you. This was great. Uhuru.
Uhuru. And I want to just again salute the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party, salute Chairman Amalia Yeshitela, Deputy Chair Onizine Yeshitela, the entire National Central Committee, Akilé Anai, Chairwoman Penny Hess, and all of you who contributed tonight, who contributed $443, is that correct? $433. Which is a great but very strange number. So go ahead and bring it up to 500. You don't have to stop contributing because the web event is over. The website doesn't shut down just because the broadcast ends. The website is live, and you can continue to go ahead and chisel away at that last $67 or more, because every single hour of everyday imperialism is working to extract value and resources from African people. And we in the Solidarity Movement must work every single day to return the resources as reparations to African people. So go ahead, blackpowerblueprint.org, and I will turn it back over to our host, Jamie Simpson.
Uhuru, I am really honored to be a part of this process, to be a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. I want to thank everyone who has contributed to this amazing, optimistic, visionary project, the Black Power Blueprint tonight. Thank you for taking this stance. Please continue to do it at blackpowerblueprint.org. And I especially want to thank our esteemed guest, Director Akilé Anai of the African People's Socialist Party. I want to salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the African People's Socialist Party, Deputy Chair Onezene Yeshitela, Chairwoman Penny Hess, and my co-host, Chair Jesse Neville. And I want to bring it out by, of course, thanking our studio and everyone who's helped to make this web talk show a reality. And we will close by saying, unity through reparations! Uhuru!
Uhuru!
See you next week. Thank you.